Coming up on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, my co-host Mikah Sargent, and a whole lot of awesome guests. We're going to talk about Instagram for children and how maybe that's not the best idea in the world. Also, Spotify created a car thing, and they called it Car Thing. Apple's springtime event, we have the invite, and we talk about what we can expect at the event anyways. Twitter's responsible machine learning study that they've just kicked off. And finally, the FCC clamping down on robocalls. I can get behind that. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 179, recorded Thursday, April 15th, 2021.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Expand the skills of your IT team and get them the up-to-date certificates they need. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription. Just use code TNW30 at checkout. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other one, that guy over there, Jason Howell. What's up? You got your vaccine appointment. I'm so excited for you, Mikah. That's awesome.
I'm very happy this coming Wednesday. First shot in my arm, and I can't wait.
Nice.
Can't wait to do it.
Can't wait for that slight discomfort at the point of entry.
Yes, exactly. I look forward to the pain.
Yes, indeed. It's a good pain to look forward to. All right, today's a little different. We have our interviews coming later, so we're going to start today's show with the stories of the week, starting with you, Mikah. What you got?
Yes, I wanted to talk about a story I saw hit the waves from the New York Times, and it is about... this is kind of wild. So Instagram obviously exists on its own. And there had been some talk of Instagram creating an Instagram for Kids app. And so this app would obviously be targeted at users under the age of 13. And the idea is that it would have, some safety filters, some different things built in to keep your child kind of safe whenever they're browsing online. And you can think of it like YouTube for Kids or some of these other social media services that have tried to make versions of their apps that are more for kids and have certain protections in place for them to use. However, an international coalition of 35 children's and consumer groups said, hey, Instagram, maybe don't do this. So this is fascinating to me because it's international and it's 35 different groups that have all kind of said this. Now, of course, there have been ongoing concerns with Instagram itself as a way for underage users kind of getting access to Instagram and not having to kind of prove that they are of age. And then also with that comes a whole host of concerns for bullying, for sexual harassment, and anything that kind of brings to the table. So that on its own is kind of, with Instagram itself being a concern, they're going, okay, maybe then it does make sense to have a separate app for kids to be able to use. But this group that wrote this letter to Mark Zuckerberg, they said, look, you might think that this is going to fix the issue, but it's really not going to do anything different because from ages 10 to 12, those kids that are under 13, they're probably not going to switch from the accounts they have on Instagram to a kind of cut back version of Instagram. That has no interest to them. And even if parents get them to switch, then there's still the chance that they would be, want to be drawn back to the actual main app. And then also, and I think this is the bigger thing, is as the New York Times puts it, well, it's from the letter, but it kind of summed up here. It could hook even younger users on endless routines of photo scrolling and body image shame. And I think that is the biggest concern here. There's a lot of there have been some studies that have been done on Instagram, and there's a lot of focus on the way that this platform specifically has impacted mental health. The way that some folks feel encouraged to share sort of their best selves and not be truthful with their appearances, with their daily lives or day-to-day lives, and sort of, keeping up with the, is it the Williamses? I don't remember.
Joneses?
The Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses mentality. So there's a lot going on here that I think is of concern, and I think is a good point. But I do wonder, Jason, for you, have you used for your kids any kids versions of other social media services or other, streaming services, or basically options for parents to let their kids do certain things, but with protections in place that companies create for parents to control those situations?
Yeah, I mean, social networks, no. Neither of my kids. My oldest daughter's 11. My youngest turns 8 in like a week. Neither of them have any sort of access whatsoever or interaction with any of the social networks, unless I'm like showing them a tweet on my timeline that's, like dogs or something. So they aren't getting that interaction there. Where they do have some sort of exposure is YouTube. And on their tablets, they have YouTube Kids, which is a kids version of YouTube. It's a curated version of YouTube for the most part. And we've had pretty good success with that. There were news reports a couple of years ago when that was just starting about, improper or unfit for children videos ending up in the algorithm or the selection process somehow, and kids seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing in the YouTube Kids app. We haven't experienced that, and we've been pretty closely, tuned into what they are watching. Now they're starting, though, because not all TVs, like our smart TV doesn't have a YouTube Kids app. It just has a YouTube app. And so now they're starting to watch content on YouTube, which we watch very closely to be sure, if we walk in the room and we notice that they're watching something that we do not like, we turn it off, we, discourage that. But it's not a perfect science. I mean, this, Instagram for children, I remember when this news first hit a couple of weeks ago, and there's no way that I look at that and think, oh, that's a really good idea. I suppose I can kind of understand the mentality of, well, the kids are going to do it anyways, so why don't we give them a version of this that is more geared for them? But I mean, there's no good habit or good kind of mental lesson that's learned by endlessly scrolling on a timeline and seeing some of the stuff that you do see on Instagram, which can be very comparative. My girls use an app for school called Seesaw, and there is kind of a social component to Seesaw where you share your work and other students in the class can go on and they can and everything like that. And even there, they're being taught the endless scrolling, pull to refresh. That was better than my assignment. Why did she get 20 hearts on her assignment and I only got 2? And I mean, these are lessons that as a parent, I'm happy to have this conversation with them. And I think we do a really great job of talking them through that so they don't get locked inside of that jumbled maze. But I don't see a kid's version of Instagram being a really great kind of habit or ritual for a preteen or, a tween or whatever, a younger kid learning. That's just maybe it's okay that comes later,
Yeah, I agree. I think that the idea that it can not have to be a right now thing is totally reasonable. In any case, we'll see. I find it interesting thinking about how Facebook will or won't respond to this. And if they choose to go forward with this, despite this call for a change here. So we'll see.
I'll be curious to see that myself as well.
What have you got for us?
My story of the week, it's actually pretty quick. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Spotify music service, they just released a thing called Car Thing, which is actually it's a product that seems to be designed for cars that maybe don't have an in-car infotainment system, or someone who doesn't want to use their phone to drive, to interact with when they're driving around, specifically with Spotify. This thing is specific to Spotify, but it's a limited product launch. It's free to certain US Spotify premium users. So you have to be signed up for the premium account. You have to sign up on a wait list and then cross your fingers. I've done that. We'll see what happens. It's free. Though as a user, you pay for shipping, and then you get this like detachable screen that has two buttons on the front, one small one, which is just like a back button, and then a larger one, which helps for on-screen interactions, even though the screen is a touch screen. And it's really designed to bring more of a voice control aspect to music, from Spotify in the car. So, hey, Spotify, skip, or hey, Spotify, start a playlist, something along those lines. Not that we don't have a million other ways to do that right now, but here's yet another one. It doesn't have a speaker on board, so it's a Bluetooth device. Connects, into your car stereo. You can either wire it in or Bluetooth, and then also connects via Bluetooth to your phone. So basically all it's doing, it's like a visual control surface for the music content that's on your phone. So on one hand, I get it. On another hand, I'm kind of confused, kind of like, well, a phone already does does all of this. So I don't know why that needs to be there. At the same time, I'm curious because we have a Sequoia that has an infotainment system, which is fine. It's not amazing. It's not like CarPlay or Android Auto or anything like that, but it gets the job done. And then we have an old Prius that has nothing in there. So I'd be curious to have it in the Prius and actually see if I care about it enough, compared to just syncing up my phone. I kind of don't know why I would use this over my phone, but I don't know. Maybe you have an idea, as far as why this over what we've been using for years.
So the difference between iOS and Android, I think, is where Spotify might be trying to slide in, because on Android, having Android Auto, you can take the device that you already have, your phone or what have you, turn on Android Auto, and suddenly you have that little touch screen that works as an Android Auto vehicle. Unfortunately, for some stupid reason, iOS does not do the same thing. You cannot get CarPlay in your car except via a CarPlay-enabled stereo system or aftermarket in-dash entertainment center. Right. And so even though I've got this giant honking phone that I could turn sideways and, tap enable CarPlay when I got in my car and then have CarPlay in my car, can't do that. And so I really think that this is particularly for iOS users who want to have that infotainment center, but don't want to spend the $600 to $1,000 it costs for one of those aftermarket stereo systems. They're very expensive without it. And so I actually think that this is a pretty cool idea. Again, probably not something I would use, because if I was going to go for something like this, I would want to go all in and just get the thing that supports CarPlay and Android Auto. But ultimately, I hope what this does is it encourages Apple to just set up a system where CarPlay is able to be used with your phone, because CarPlay does not exist in the infotainment center. Your phone is the thing that is driving the infotainment center, the CarPlay system on the thing. So when you get in the car with your phone, all it does is essentially route a display that is CarPlay in the vehicle and let you interact with it there. So it's already like built into the operating system on the devices that we have. Why can't I just put my phone on my dash in the cradle that I have, and then it knows I'm in the car and let me use CarPlay? So Spotify, keep doing your car thing, because it should help us who would like to have CarPlay without spending an arm and a leg.
Yeah, there you go. I think you probably nailed it. I hadn't even considered that aspect. I was looking at it. I was like, okay, like I get it. Voice control for Spotify would be nice, but I kind of already have that with my phone. Like maybe it's a difference in syntax. Instead of having to say, hey, G, play this on Spotify, I could be like, hey, Spotify, just play this. So it saves me a couple of words. That makes a lot more sense, is just how, kind of more of the kind of like official, legitimate layer that Apple requires in order to do this sort of thing in the car, compared to Google, which is a little bit more open as far as that's concerned. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. All righty. Up next, Apple has announced an event for Tuesday, April 20th. Dan Moren shares the details on what we can likely expect. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by the fine folks at IT Pro TV. Whether you run a business or are looking to be employed, you know that you constantly have to stay up to date on the latest trends in your field of expertise. The same goes for IT teams. Build your IT team to be ready for any challenge with IT Pro TV. Not only can you get your team the most recent certificates and training in IT, but you can also make sure they stay on track. You can track your team's results, so prove the ROI of your training spend with the Pro Portal. Manage your seats, assign and unassigned team members, and access monthly usage reports. You can easily manage your teams, including subsets of users or teams, by providing them with customized assignments, monitoring progress, and reporting on usage of the platform. Assignments can be full courses and or individual episodes within courses, and then download that information in a convenient CSV for more advanced reporting needs. And when it comes to those advanced reports, you'll get immediate insight into your team's viewing patterns and progress over any period of time with visual reports. Dynamic reports are updated weekly, monthly, and quarterly. All you do is sign up for email alerts to be notified when reports are ready. Your team's detailed viewing activity is at your fingertips, and a CSV download for any report type. Individuals and teams will have fun while they learn. With 7 studios and more than 5,800 hours of engaging video training and the fun edutainers, as they call themselves, IT Pro TV is the best online IT training platform to keep your employees motivated. Now, for the month of April, IT Pro TV is focusing on Linux. They'll be having 2 Linux-related webinars and a Linux free weekend on April 17th to the 18th. That's coming up as we're recording this show. And if you've been checking out IT Pro TV's podcast, Technado with Don Pizzette, by the way, they're celebrating the 200th episode of the podcast on April 22nd. They'll be having a live show and giveaways, so you don't want to miss it. If you are interested in learning IT or getting certified for the IT job you want, you'll absolutely benefit from IT Pro TV. Start or advance your IT career today. Go to itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 to receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. Thanks so much to IT Pro TV for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. And now it's time. Folks, Apple has announced an event. We had heard for quite a while that Apple was going to be doing an event. I think it was first rumored to be in March, and then March just kept rolling along. And then April started, and we were going, maybe not. And then they announced WWDC, it's Worldwide Developers Conference. So we thought, okay, maybe they're just not doing an event. And then suddenly, bada bing, bada boom, the Spring Forward event was announced and invites were sent out. And we are joined today by Six Colors' own Dan Moren to talk about Apple's event. Hello and welcome back, Dan.
Hi, Mike. I'm just glad that I still have my eyebrows.
It's really nice to have you reporting in from the mothership here today.
I've snuck into Apple Park. I've got all the inside scoop on what's going on.
The wind is low. That's good. So we can hear you very clearly.
Good.
Yeah. So let's kick things off with, it's fun to do the little bit of, does the invite tell us anything? So I'm curious in looking at the invite this time around. And of course, the invite says spring forward. It has an Apple logo kind of rendered in a spring. And maybe John can show that on screen for us. It's a colorful spring that sort of rolls around and forms the shape of Apple's logo. And again, it's a spring loaded. Anything we can glean from this about the upcoming event?
Well, this is always, like Kremlinology, right? Like this is like digging deep into what is the significance of these swirls. The most interesting conspiracy theory that I did see, which I thought was kind of hilarious, was certain the loops kind of line up with certain parts of the classic hello from the original Macintosh when Steve Jobs came out on stage and wrote hello back in 1984. Some of the loops are apparently the same shape as like parts of the letters, like the L and the little part of the H and stuff like that. What that means, take your pick. Is it maybe Apple Pencil revision, maybe something handwriting related, or it could be a signal of something happening with the Mac. Obviously, people have expected things like a new iMac potentially. So could that be sort of hearkening back to the original Macintosh? And then, of course, as they've done with these last few events, there's an AR component to this in certain browsers. You can sort of look at it and it's got like an AR object. And I think Greg Joswiak, the Apple's SVP of marketing, showed off like having it sort of bounce around the Apple Park campus. So, lots of people still theorizing that Apple might have an AR thing that they're doing. Lots of options here, but not a lot that's terribly concrete.
Kind of looks like finger painting to me. So maybe they're going to come out with the Apple finger paint tablet.
Could be. I don't know.
My money's on
that's
that.
For kids. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
Those are all good thoughts. And of course, there's also the option that it doesn't mean anything and that it is just the Apple invite. But I do like to have that little bit of, as you said, criminology. So let's talk about what the rumors have suggested is definitely going to, rumors have suggested is most likely to be announced at the event. And I believe the top of that list is iPad Pro. Is that correct?
Yeah. The iPad Pro is largely considered to be kind of long in the tooth at this point. It got a revamp last spring when the Magic Keyboard was released. But of course, at the same time, it didn't get a huge update. It had the LiDAR sensor added and they upped the chip a little bit, but it was more or less pretty close to the 2018 iPad Pro. And of course, since then, the iPad Air has come out and it's got a much faster chip in it. And so everyone's feeling like, well, the iPad Pro got left in the dust. What's up with that? So I think that that's the most likely thing that we can see there because it just seems like it's time. It's time for it to get a more substantial update and to sort of stop being overshadowed by the iPad Air.
Definitely. So the iPad Pro, of course, got the introduction of the LiDAR, which was an AR forward feature. And with these kind of rumors about, or the criminology kind of surrounding that AR functionality, it would be interesting to see what Apple could do to improve upon the iPad Pro. Rumors of new display technology. This could also speak to, as you touched on earlier, a new Apple Pencil. If Jason is correct, then maybe the new Apple Pencil is called the Apple Finger and looks like a finger, but I don't know about that. But is new display technology kind of the extent of what's expected from the new iPad Pro and an update? I mean, are we looking at a chip bump and a change in thinness or form factor at all?
Yeah, I think the chip is the most likely. I'll actually push back on the display thing a little bit. It's unclear at this point because there have been some, reports of slowdowns in the supply chain for some of these new display technologies they want to use, which include things like the mini LED. So it's unclear whether or not those updates will come in this model or whether they might be held for a subsequent model in the future. I think the processor bump is the most likely. I think the previous iPad Pro used an A12Z, and the iPhones and iPad Air are up in the A14. So, two processor generations in theory later, one would assume that this is at the very least probably an A14X, which, features the better graphics performance than the same A14 that you'd find in the iPhone 12s from last year. So that seems the most likely. I think there's some discussion about things like, could they update it, go from USB-C to Thunderbolt for faster peripheral connections? Could they enable, connections to external displays, for example, making this more and more like a laptop? As all those things are possible, I think there's also, as always with Apple, the possibility that it's something that we haven't even thought of yet that they're going to surprise us with.
Definitely. Okay, so outside of that, any other kind of more likely to be announced? Are there any other things that are more likely to be announced at this event that are unrelated to the iPad?
Yeah, I think the next most likely thing, I would put two possibilities there. One is another release of an Apple Silicon Mac, probably an iMac and probably a low-end iMac, using the same or a very slightly updated version of the M1 chip that we saw roll out in the first Apple Silicon Macs last fall. I think it's possible. So you could see one that's maybe more like in the 21 to 24 inch range, but it's also equally possible that that is not a thing at all that will be on the docket. And the other thing that's been rumored a bunch is those AirTags, those locating tiles, kind of like the tile, locators that you can clip to your keys or what have you. There's been a lot of software support of that rolling out, including Apple recently announced its Fine Vine Network third-party availability with partners like Chipolo and Van Moof. And so there's the possibility they roll out their own first-party solution for those sort of tracking tiles as well. But again, nobody's really sure. Those things have kind of been known for a year or more without actually appearing. But it's also equally possible that Apple has decided not to pursue that as a sort of first-party venture.
Definitely. That's kind of the thing that I'm paying the most attention to, that I'm curious to see is at the event. I guess outside of that, anything else that could be announced at this event that we can look forward to, or is everything else kind of going to be pushed to WWDC and the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about redesigns of things like the Apple TV and, of course, the HomePod. There were some reports in Bloomberg this past week that Apple might be sort of coming up with ways to combine the HomePod and the Apple TV, or putting like a FaceTime camera in the HomePod. I tend to think those things are farther off. They seem a little early in development to be released this early. I think, the only other thing that I would certainly expect to see is more on the software side. Obviously, they've been holding iOS 14.5 for a while. It's gone through a bunch of betas, comes with a bunch of new features, including, of course, the app transparency, tracking transparency that they've caused such a big uproar with Facebook. I think that will probably be the moment where Tim Cook shows this off and explains why it's so good for users. And I think there could be potentially software features in there that haven't been found yet or are rolled out in conjunction with new hardware, such as a new iPad. So I think, even though it seems like, we might expect a lot of things that we already kind of know about, I think there's always the possibility that there's stuff that we didn't really see coming.
Definitely. Well, I know we will be covering the event live, Leo and I, on April 20th. I imagine Six Colors will have some write-ups about the event, probably going into it and post. And so we'll be looking forward to checking those out. And of course, Dan, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. If folks want to follow you online and check out all your great work, where do they go to do that?
You can find all about me at dmoren.com. I write over at Six Colors, which is sixcolors.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Pretty much every place else is at dmoren. And of course, I co-host Clockwise over on the Relay FM network with you, Mikah.
It's weird how that works.
Wait a minute, you two have met before?
What?
Whoa.
Tell me, sir, we've never met, you and I.
Yes, Dan Florin, how are you today? I better get you out of here before I make more dumb jokes. It was good to chat with you as always and to see your face.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys. Really nice to see you guys.
Bye-bye. All righty, folks. Up next, have Twitter's discovery algorithms led to, quote, unintentional harm? We'll learn more about that in a minute. In just a minute.
All right. So Twitter is launching a new effort to what it calls responsible machine learning. And I mean, this is such a hot topic right now with, not just Twitter, but Facebook, all the major big tech companies are really dealing with this kind of reaction to their artificial intelligence systems, the machine learning systems, bias, all sorts of things. So Twitter's launched this effort to see how its own systems affect its users in, I was going to say positive and negative ways, but really I think the report, it really focuses on kind of like the negative ways that can happen. And joining us to talk about it is Karissa Bell from Engadget. Welcome to the show, Karissa.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. It's great to get you on finally. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the problem here. Obviously, Twitter's had its fair share of problems. So has Facebook, but this is Twitter's kind of effort. So what are they kind of, what is the preface to this report and to this effort that they have going on?
Yeah, I mean, like you just said, this is kind of an issue that I think has come up throughout the social media industry. With things like misinformation or political advertising or kind of like all these big issues affecting social media platforms right now. Like we've kind of, heard a lot of concerns about how these automated systems are maybe built for one thing and then it turns out they're doing something else. And I think there's kind of this increasing sense that social media users should really have a better understanding of how these systems actually work and what it is that they're doing. So I think that's kind of the big picture preface of sort of why Twitter and other companies might want to look at these issues.
Right. So then as they kind of dive into this, and I'm not even aware of like how long they envision this to take place, like what the time horizon is on something like this, but what exactly are they going to be taking a look at, and kind of how are they planning on conducting this study to be sure that they're looking at the right things?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's fairly early with a lot of this work, so we don't necessarily have a ton of details on the specifics. What we do know is that they're going to get a group of people from across different areas of the company, research, data scientists, engineers, product folks, people who work on safety issues, who all kind of form these groups that kind of study these specific issues. And I think the idea is that like each of these teams can kind of bring their own expertise and understanding of their own problems to kind of look at these things holistically. In terms of what they're going to look at, they identified a couple areas to start. I think eventually they kind of want to look at many more, but the things that they've mentioned so far is their image cropping algorithm, which is something that's come up. People have pointed out that it seems as if the Twitter tends to crop the image preview so that it will show white faces more often than other people. So they said they're going to look at that. They're also going to look at various ways they recommend content. They want to see if there is a bias in terms of political ideologies or in terms of racial bias, and like if they're recommending content from some groups of people more than others. So those are the issues that they've identified so far. Okay.
Wow, that's a great start. So then it sounds like this report. Like it sounds like a report like this could be beneficial for, companies outside of Twitter, but is really meant to focus Twitter on what exactly it can do to correct or, address some of these issues in its own machine language systems. And it's a report that's designed to help them kind of fix certain things, and not just about discovery. In other words, this is really about addressing Twitter's process effectively.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they want to, learn. They want to, actually have a clear understanding of kind of how these systems might be biased. Another important piece is they're going to make their findings public. So, we can get a better understanding of it. Researchers outside the company can kind of look at what they're doing. And, I think in some cases we might see this kind of actually impact specific Twitter features. Like you can see that with the image cropping feature, for example. Like maybe they could tweak the underlying software in some way to, make it more fair or something like that. I think in other cases, it might be something that they more kind of think about going forward as sort of like a big picture learning that might kind of help them do better the next time around.
Yeah. Interesting. So what about the kind of the further reaching effects of this sort of study? Like obviously Twitter is doing this because they have they're interested in helping themselves kind of maneuver through this challenge, which is very top of mind right now. But what kind of interactivity could a report like this have with companies outside of Twitter? You mentioned that they're making it public. It strikes me that a report like this could be incredibly beneficial for everyone to participate in and not just be locked into Twitter. I don't know. I don't know how something like this expands out to companies like Facebook. Maybe Facebook already has its own process or its own report discovery in the process right now. But what kind of sharing might Twitter do to encourage that? Have they mentioned anything about kind of working with other companies on a larger effort in this case?
I don't think they have specifically, but I think it's a good question. And I think it, like you kind of suggested, it kind of speaks to like this sort of bigger push right now for people who, people want to understand how these companies operate. They want to understand how their products are affecting us. So I think that even if, say, a company like Facebook, for example, I think they might approach this kind of problem very differently than Twitter would. But if Twitter were to, when Twitter does kind of make these findings public and kind of talk about what they learn, and if they do make some changes, I think that maybe could create some pressure within the industry for other people to kind of do something on this front. If you see one company doing it, then, and this is something that also, people in Congress have talked about. They've talked about whether or not they should actually legislate AI fairness or require companies to kind of conduct audits or something like that. So I think there generally is kind of growing pressure on these platforms to think about these issues.
Yeah, that's a point I hadn't considered about this. Obviously, I'm sure Twitter is doing this because they truly want to improve the network, but there's also a kind of a self-interest perspective in the sense that doing something like this ahead of regulation could potentially, change the kind of regulation that might be deemed necessary down the line. So it could be kind of self-serving in that regard. You mentioned in your article something that I had read very briefly about in the past, but then I was reminded of it when you wrote about CEO Jack Dorsey's idea of a marketplace for algorithms. I thought this was just kind of an interesting side tangent, definitely related. Explain what that is to the best of your knowledge. Like, what is a marketplace for algorithms? How is that beneficial for users? And I mean, how would it tie into something like this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Jack Dorsey has talked about, his desire to kind of like create a decentralized standard for social networks. And, Twitter has this other kind of project called Blue Sky where they're starting to explore how this might work. It's extremely early. And I think this thing of the marketplace for algorithms is sort of related to that. I think the way it might work is like, right now with Twitter, I think, for example, you have your home timeline. You can choose either to look at things chronologically, or you can use Twitter's ranking algorithm, which I think sorts it, based on what it thinks will be most important to you. So right now, that you have those two options. Maybe if there was some kind of marketplace, then third-party developers or others could create their own kind of ranking system for how they want content to be surfaced to you. So, maybe that's like you only see sports first, or I don't know, something along those lines. And then people can kind of look at those options and choose like, oh, I want to have this person's, ranking algorithm influencing my feed, or, have it, from some other developer. I think the idea is that you have these like third parties who also can kind of create these, and then the users can pick and choose which ones they want to see.
Yeah, so often in big tech, companies' offerings, these algorithms, in air quotes, because algorithms, like AI, seems to cover a whole lot of different things. It's like the secret sauce of how these networks are powered. And so often it seems like they do whatever they can to kind of hide, I don't know, maybe hide's the wrong word, but make sure that their secret sauce is their secret sauce, because it largely drives the personality or the approach of that particular social network. So I think the idea of like democratizing or opening up almost like, these companies have my data and I want access to my data. It's my data. Okay, here you go. It's kind of the same with algorithms. I think that's a pretty powerful idea. I'd be really curious to see how that addresses things like this. Maybe it affects it for the better. One thing that strikes me also about this is that technology companies in general are doing a lot, let's say after the fact. Something bad happens and then they're looking at it and addressing it after the fact, instead of kind of getting out and really learning about the ways that these things can be used or abused or go sideways ahead of time. Are these technology companies doing work effectively in risk assessment as far as that's concerned? And it really seems like they can improve on that. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the big question here. I think, I think it's definitely something that they're thinking about more than they used to. But the fact that we're seeing these kinds of initiatives, it's obviously like they're not doing a good enough job in terms of anticipating how their products might end up actually being used. I think that, what we've seen in the past is like they've been very reactive, where something maybe something comes up and it's a researcher or an advocacy group or someone else or a journalist points out that they're recommending something that they probably shouldn't be recommending, or their systems are behaving in a way that is not actually good for their users. And we see that these companies have gotten very good at like reacting to those changes when they become public, and they get a lot of public pressure from it. But we don't necessarily always see them actually taking a proactive approach and kind of looking at this ahead of time. And so I think now we're starting to see them at least thinking about doing that, or trying to, figure out how that works and, develop some kind of framework for that. I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. I don't think that we should expect, huge changes overnight. I think, especially when you talk about Twitter, they're not a company that's known for moving particularly quickly when it comes to developing new processes or products. So I think it's still going to be a slow roll. Yeah,
I would agree. I would agree. But that's good news that there is at least some attention being paid to the effects that are possible, the potential effects down the line, instead of always being so reactive. It's interesting to me. These companies have insane amounts of money. Like that should be as equally important. And I have to imagine they have the resources to do it. So I'm happy to hear that they are. Karissa Bell writes for Engadget. Karissa, I'm so psyched to get you on today. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Well, I guess they can find me on Engadget or on Twitter. I'm on Karissa BE.
Awesome. Thank you, Karissa. Appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right. And up next, how the FCC is getting involved, finally, with robocalls. If there's one thing that I have to imagine unites us all, it's our collective dislike for robocalls. There's probably that one person out there that's like, I love them. Probably because they love to like troll the system or something. But most of us don't really care very much for robocalls. I could definitely speak for myself on that one. And I'm getting a lot of them, just a lot of them coming through lately. So the Federal Communications Commission they're finally getting involved in tamping down the amount of robocalls that we are receiving, thankfully. And joining us to talk about this new effort is Kieren McCarthy from The Register. Welcome to the show, Kieren.
Hi, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Even better now that you're here. Appreciate your time. Thank you. So This was a Tuesday announcement. We can start there. Talk a little bit about the announcement in general. What did the FCC have to say about this?
Well, there was three components which they purposely put together. One was they gave some. They sent a letter to mobile phone companies saying, please give us full details of your blocking tools that are available for free to your users and tell us how effective they are. Then they said, by the way, here are 2 cease and desist letters to 2 quite small phone companies, but nonetheless phone companies saying, we have discovered that you are providing robocall services to clients. We want you to stop doing that. And if you don't stop doing that, we will basically cut you off from the phone network, which would be very significant for their business. And then thirdly, it said, we're going to set up a web page that will track the actions that we take in response to this act that was passed the very end of 2019, the Traced Act, which Congress passed to help to give the FCC powers to, act on robocalls. So combined, it's actually a pretty good way of dealing with robocalls. Is what the FCC is supposed to do.
Yeah, sounds pretty comprehensive, multi-pronged. I like it. Let's start with the these cease and desist letters. So so then, if I'm not mistaken, this would be one of the first times that the FCC has made this sort of action specifically against companies that are hosting robocall activity. Is that right?
I think that's right. I'm not going to say yes for certain,
right.
in case they did, but that certainly the first time I'd heard of them taking such strong action. They have fined people in the past, and then it's questionable, how useful that is, or whether they even get the actual money that they fine people for. But this is a pretty strong letter. It says, we have decided, I forget the actual wording, but we have found that you are providing illegal robocall services to one of your clients, and we want you to report back on what you're going to do about it in 48 hours. We need you to cut it off within 14 days. And if you don't, we will we will block your traffic from the overall telephone network, which is that's a pretty strong come down. Now, it was on very small companies, but even so, it's a big flag. It's the sort of thing that will actually impact robocalls.
Okay. Yeah, and it's a signal to others to beware of the FCC. You might get one of these letters too.
Don't want to.
Yeah, definitely don't want that. Talk a little bit about the call blocking report. Apparently, you wrote about this is due to come out sometime this year. How does that tie into this announcement? Because that's still being created, right? Yeah,
so you sort of need to understand how the FCC works broadly with a bunch of different things. But the FCC works by Congress typically passes a law saying, giving the FCC powers, and then it says, and we want to get a report from you. And it's usually every year. We want a report from you saying how it's going. And they do this for broadband, and now they're doing it for robocalls. And the FCC reports, does its thing, sends a report to Congress, says, either it's fine or it's not fine. And if it's not fine, the expectation is the FCC will use some of its powers to actually clamp down on it or improve it. So this call blocking report, the first one was last year. The second one will be this year. It came out last year in June, I believe. I don't know if they will do it in June. I mean, they have a fair amount of leeway to when they release it. But that report is the big deciding point. They put the report together, they provide it to Congress, and then they are either expected to take action or not take action, depending on what it says. So that's the structure. That's the federal structure in how action is taken.
I see. That makes sense. And you did just mention briefly that the FCC is working on a site that, meant to basically outline its work, the requirements, all that kind of stuff. But this was authorized back in 2019. And I think in general, it just seems like there's a little bit of lag here as far as the FCC and this issue is concerned. But why this specifically took so long?
Because the people in charge didn't want to do anything. There's been a lot of dragging of feet at the FCC on a range of issues under the previous chair, Ajit Pai. And this was one of the issues that was really dragged out. I mean, he announced things. He announced fines. He announced, plans and ideas and meetings. But when it came to actual action, it was sorely lacking. And no, they had the power. The FCC has had the power to do this. It's just not lacked the will. But under the new chair, Jessica Rosenworcel, she's on this. I mean, she's been complaining about robocalls. She's as irritated with them as you and I are. So she's been complaining about this for a long time. And clearly this is a shift. The FCC is now under her leadership saying, right, we will now clamp down on robocalls.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. Big change to the White House. And I mean, I feel like just in general, in a lot of other facets, we've seen a lot of change that's actually moving that kind of seemed a little bit stalled in previous years. So all kind of related to the same thing, I would imagine anyways. Now, mobile phone companies, you also wrote a little bit about kind of these efforts, and I've seen them, advertised and promoted. Phone companies have systems in place to encourage their users to sign up for a robocall sort of blocking setup, let's say. Yeah. Sometimes it's free. Often it's a paid service. You mentioned in your article that people using these networks, like one of their biggest complaints is robocalls and spam calls and spam messages and that sort of stuff. Yet these services that people can pay for to address them aren't as used as maybe they. I don't know. I would think they would be used more if people were saying this is their biggest annoyance. Why do you think that is? And do you think this is going to change things so that services like that are offered for free? Could that have that impact?
Yes. I mean, everybody is getting robocalls. I wouldn't be surprised if I got a robocall while I'm talking to you. I'm currently getting. There was a high point. I think it's about 2 years ago where I just wouldn't answer any phone call if I didn't have the name. Now I tend to answer the calls, but I still get 5 to 10 a day, which is ridiculous. So yes, this will work. It will help. But what the truth of the matter is that it costs phone companies money to do this, and it cuts revenue. They do make money from robocalls. So they do not have a financial incentive to do this. So it's a matter of pressure. And under pressure from Congress and the FCC and consumers, they have produced tools. The free ones aren't typically that great. They work relatively well. But of course, robocallers find their way around it. These sort of tools need to be updated. They need to work with whatever the robocallers are doing. And so that's what you pay, why they have more expensive. I would say on average it's about $5 a month, and they're slightly better, but they don't really go to much trouble to advertise them, and people aren't particularly keen on spending $5 a month with the concept that they might cut down robocalls. So it's this is why we're all still being driven crazy by them. That what the FCC is clearly flagging is it's saying, tell us about your free services and tell us how effective they are. And they're clearly preparing to say, and if you don't do this, then we'll make you. So the idea is that they're just going to have to bite the cost of it because it's what consumers and the FCC and Congress and everybody in the entire world wants. And you're just going to have to eat the cost of that. And then once it's free, it's going to be easy. I think they would just then start adding it onto their systems, really. It may take a while. But once it's free, you can imagine a lot of people, word of mouth. If I was to tell you right now, oh, well, if you go here and you do this and you do this, then it'll cut all robocalls. That's going to spread like wildfire. So that's the goal. That's the clear goal of the FCC. And I think they might pull it off.
Awesome. That's great news. I'm looking forward to that future. I'm sure I've also gotten at least a couple of robocalls this morning. It's day in, day out. So I look forward to that future. Kieren McCarthy writes for The Register, theregister.com. I was used to saying theregister.co.uk, but now you have theregister.com. Congratulations. If people want to follow your work online, where can they find you, Kieren?
Twitter, I suppose. At Kieren McCarthy, or read The Register. It's probably a better idea.
Absolutely. That makes a whole lot of sense. Kieren, thank you so much for hopping on with us today. We really appreciate it.
Take it easy.
All right. We'll talk with you soon. All right. So before the next robocall comes in, we'll go ahead and end this episode of Tech News Weekly. We have reached the end of this week's episode anyways. We publish every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That's the show page on the web where you can go to subscribe, audio, video feeds, jump out to podcatchers, jump out to YouTube and subscribe there. Everything you need to know is there.
Can you please stop calling me? I'm so sick of all of these robocalls. Oh, sorry.
I am a robot. I can't understand you.
You can follow us on social media. We are at Twit on Twitter. We are at twit.tv on Instagram and at Twit Talk on TikTok. And if you want more of my insufferable joking, you can follow me on pretty much as many social media networks as I can find at Mikah Sargent, or head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUAHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active. Of course, check out my other shows, including Smart Tech Today, which records right after or soon after this show, and iOS Today, which records tomorrow. Jason Howell, what about you?
At Jason Howell on Twitter. And yes?
You too. Another one.
Man, these robocalls. Sorry, I had to, it looked important. That's the problem. At Jason Howell on Twitter. Acting.
You're interested in renewing your auto warranty now.
No, go away. No, I told you I don't want any auto warranty. It's a scam. Go away. Okay. Thank you to John Ashley for playing along. Also for editing and producing the show at the studio, for Burke for helping out in the studio, for you for watching and listening, and also checking out my review of the OnePlus Watch, which I have on my desk and not on my wrist. You can see why by going to twit.tv/HOT and check out my review of it there. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands on Photography, here on TWiT TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.